Hey, folks, thanks for tuning in to Ken Michaels Radio. I've had a blast for almost a year now, believe it or not, interviewing people in the Beatle world, musicians, podcasters, friends, you name it. And before we start with our show this time, I want to encourage you. I'd love to get some feedback from you guys about this channel and what you like the most about it. There's a lot of different features that I have, the Number 9 Dream Show, the Fab 5 Show. There are one-on-one interviews on a specific subject where we analyze maybe an album or a period on the Beatles. If there's anything in particular that you like the most or you'd like to see more of on this channel, or if you have any ideas of your own, please pass them along to me. You can reach me directly and privately at my email address, which is everylittlething@att.net. And on the show this time, we have Dylan Sevey coming back to our show. For all of you who have been wondering, where's that guy that looks like Ringo, circa 1965, 66? Well, this is him. Boy, actually,
I know.
that could be like 68 now.
Yeah,
Maybe
if only I could grow
69.
the good facial hair.
Well, Dylan's back with us. Dylan is a musician who plays a variety of instruments. His main instrument is the drums, though he also plays guitar and sings very well too, I might add. And he wanted to join us for a Number 9 Dream show. And in case you're a newcomer to my channel, Number 9 Dream is when I ask my guests to pick a particular Beatle, and then I come up with 3 categories for that Beatle. And I ask my guests to name their top 3 in each category. So you get 3 times 3, 9 answers, therefore Number 9 Dream. And we thought it'd be really cool, since Dylan is mainly a drummer, to talk about Ringo on the show at this time. And we're going to be covering 3 different categories, as I said, and it's going to be Dylan's top 3 moments for Ringo on drums during the Beatle years, do the same thing for Ringo's solo music. And also we thought it'd be a great idea, since we hardly ever bring it up here on this channel, top 3 all-star bands, since Ringo has now been doing his tours since 1989, believe it or not, over 30 years. And it'd be kind of fun to find out which bands Dylan likes the most and why. So welcome, after that very long introduction, Dylan, to Ken Michaels Radio.
Thank you for having me, Ken. My feedback on your channel is that I like all of it. And I will start commenting on every single video telling you that I like all of it.
Okay, make sure you're the first comment too.
I won't even watch the video. I'll just wait till it's uploaded and immediately say, I love it. It's fantastic.
All right. Anyway, since we'll be talking about Ringo and his work as a drummer, especially, and since you are a drummer, I thought we really should say a few words, certainly from your perspective, with the recent passing of Charlie Watts. I'm not aware of how much of a fan you may be of the Rolling Stones, but what you thought of him as a drummer.
I mean, I've always loved the Rolling Stones. They're probably a top 20, 25 band for me if I sat down and tried to work it out. As far as I'm concerned, the 4-album run of Beggar's Banquet, Let It Bleed, Sticky Fingers, and Exile on Main Street is as solid a 4-album run as any artist has ever had. And the albums before and after those are great too. Just that's the cream of the crop for me. It's a brilliant catalog, and it's so influential in so many levels. And Charlie Watts had a lot to do with that. The spotlight is obviously usually on Mick or Keith, but Charlie, for me, he's in that realm of musicians like George Harrison or John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin, where maybe a casual fan doesn't recognize exactly how important they are to their band's sounds. But I think one of the main reasons people love the Stones is because they have this swagger to them. And so much of that came from Charlie. He was all about the groove, very much like Ringo or Levon Helm from the band. He was certainly capable of technically proficient, flashy drumming. I mean, he was a jazz drummer. You can't be a bad drummer and play jazz. And you can hear that in songs like 19th Nervous Breakdown, Mother's Little Helper, Paint It Black. he throws in these really interesting breaks and drum fills, but he had such a unique feel. He was always driving the ship, as they say, and he was the key. That was the key for me to his brilliance, and one of the main keys to their success. I mean, you read any interview with anyone who's ever played with the Stones, and they'll tell you they were playing to Charlie, and they were trying to impress Charlie. He had that impact on them. He would find all the right moments to pull a song back or to push it forward without ever losing the groove or losing the pocket. And that was such a distinct part of their sound. I mean, if anyone other than Charlie Watts played drums on Honky Tonk Women or Street Fighting Man or Beast of Burden or Gimme Shelter or Tumbling Dice, they wouldn't be the same song. They'd still be good songs, but people love those songs whether or not they realize it because of the groove and the feel that Charlie had. And it was so unique, and it's a tremendous loss that can't be put into words. I certainly hope that I can make it to 80 years old. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he and his wife were together for 56 years. So
that's amazing.
None of that is anything to shake a stick at, but it's obviously still sad that we won't get to hear or see him play again. I know that the Stones are still going to go out on their upcoming tour per Charlie's request. I think I'd be a little put off if they continued on a regular basis under the name the Rolling Stones because of how important Charlie was to that band. But whatever happens, we're supremely lucky for having had him on this earth and in that band. He was so brilliant on so many levels.
I don't know how much I can add to what you just said, but I know that, and this is coming from someone who repeatedly says the song is more important than the recording. And I still feel that way because if the song wasn't good to begin with, we wouldn't be talking about it. But obviously everything that every musician contributes makes a difference. And so many times when I'm listening to a Stone song and I don't know the catalog thoroughly, a big reason why I love it is because of the groove that's set from Charlie. And he may not have been totally flashy. I don't really care about flash. I care about what accents the song and makes it better. Very much in the school of Ringo, So, I mean, even the more, not recent, it's 80s, something like Mixed Emotions. Part of my reason for loving the song is because of the drums. So, yeah.
I mean, the two that I always bring up, and doesn't matter, that they're hits or whatnot, but Honky Tonk Women and Beast of Burden, like almost Honky Tonk Women starts with that drum break right into it, and you're settled into that immediately. And even Beast of Burden, as soon as those drums kick in, you're right there with it. It's indescribable. I mean, it's different than any other drummer, much as Ringo or so many of the other greats are. But yeah, it's that swagger. The Stones swagger comes from Charlie's playing, and it's it can't be overstated how good he was, how important he was to those songs. That was really, really sad news to find out, especially because he had just released a statement a few weeks prior saying, I'm going to have to sit this tour out to deal with something, but I'll be back. I don't think anyone publicly knew. I mean, I don't think we still know exactly what the cause of death was, but there was no warning to it. Kind of like you knew when Levon was kind of on his last legs, you knew that when Greg Allman died that he hadn't been well recently, but this just came out of nowhere. And yes, supremely sad, but the music lives on. And I think the reason that the music is as well known as it is because of Charlie. So
definitely a tremendous loss.
Absolutely.
So let's move on and talk about Ringo.
Yeah.
And since we have 3 categories, does it matter to you what we start with?
But why don't we start with the Beatles? Why don't we go chronological?
Okay. Top
if that,
three Ringo drumming moments
yeah.
on Beatles songs.
Yeah. So I decided to stay away from some of the usual suspects because realistically, my list might be Rain, She Said, and Strawberry Fields. And those have
Mhm.
been discussed to death. And everyone knows how cool the drum beats are and Come Together and Ticket to Ride. So I stayed together from those two. And I will happily expound upon any of those if asked. But I picked one each from the early, middle, and later periods, starting with the live performance of Boys from the Hollywood Bowl. I've kind of reached a point in my life where I don't have any use for people who are dug in that Ringo was somehow not a good drummer or lucky to be in the Beatles or whatever it is. But if someone doesn't fully understand why Ringo is praised so much and they want to understand, this is one of the first things I show them, because a lot of what made Ringo such a good drummer, his restraint, his tastefulness, his nuances, those are things that might not initially jump out to people. Those are things that might take sort of repeated listens to understand. But this performance of Boys is so in your face that you have no option but to recognize how great it is. It's punk rock before punk rock was even a thing. And it's from August 64. So I doubt that he'd heard Keith Moon yet. If he had, I don't think he would have been heavily influenced by him. But that's the level that we're talking about here. This is hard-hitting, relentless drumming that most people associate with Moon or John Bonham. He is destroying his ride cymbal. He is just full muscle into that, and he's doing all of it while singing the hell out of the song. And he throws in a bunch of his kind of classic early Ringo fills, those quick rolls around the toms in between the verses. He never misses a beat. Throws in some really cool syncopation during George's solo, which is also one of George's best early solos, I think. It's just so primal, and it's not what a lot of people think about when they think about Ringo's drumming. So that's sort of expectation defying is the bow on top for me. The album version is obviously great too, but if anyone listening isn't familiar with Boys from the Hollywood Bowl, as I'm sure you are,
I tend to, when it comes to that early stuff, I'm so mesmerized by the Washington Coliseum show, because you're so zeroed in on Ringo. It's like you're burning calories as you're watching him. It's amazing how much work he does on the drums.
I almost picked I Saw Her Standing There from that show, because it's the same thing. It's like they kick in and it's at 11 from the get-go, and he never lets up. And people I think get this idea in their heads that he was just a very basic drummer, which is so false on so many levels. But you watch any of those shows, I mean, there's no doubt, like that's a rock and roll band, and they could do all the heavy hitting, as hard as the rest of them.
That's true. I think with a lot of people who don't really study the Beatles, who know a lot of their classic stuff, they look at the early period and they think it's too poppy for them, and they dismiss the Beatles for that. But you got to listen to all of it, and there's rock and roll, and there's pop, and there's R&B, and there's country, and there's all those things. But they were a great rock and roll band from the very beginning.
Yeah, and they were the best. They were the absolute best. And certainly once the Stones came along and the Who came along, those are three totally different bands. It's not even really fair to compare them, but people think of the Stones as the really swanky rock and roll band, and the Who's the really heavy hitting one. But the Beatles, right from the get-go, were doing that stuff just as good as anyone else. The Beatles' only crime was that they expanded to do everything else. so people sometimes don't consider those other things.
Shouldn't be a crime. That should not be a crime. You should admire them more.
I know I do. And anyone out there who's not familiar with Boys from the Hollywood Bowl, go admire Ringo on that song from every perspective, because it's one of his finest vocal performances too.
Hmm.
So the second one I've chosen is Tell Me What You See from Help, which probably a lot of people wouldn't think of because it's a very subdued song and it's not drum heavy, but it's an excellent example of how Ringo was subtly able to alter his parts to create dynamic shifts within a song. So for most of the tune, he's playing a standard sort of laid back beat with a side stick, which means instead of hitting the snare drum, he's laying his stick across the drum and hitting the rim with the stick. It creates a different sound. And usually when people are trying to play quieter, they'll go to that route. So most of that song is, most of the heavy hitting stuff is coming from the percussion. There's some claves and the tambourine and everything. When it gets to the buildup at the end of the verses, the tell me what you see, he doesn't do the obvious thing, which would be building up on the drums. Tell me, maybe opening the hi-hat, hitting a crash to ring it out. He keeps it down low. He doesn't hit the crash. He just drops out. He waits for everything to kick back in. We get the electric piano lick. That's where he hits you with the crash. And that's where he introduces that full snare drum. Boom, ba, boom, boom, ba. And for 2 bars, just 2 bars, it's a heavier song. It's distinct from any other section in the song. And in those 2 bars, he's unquestionably Ringo. Everything that I said about Charlie earlier, Ringo has the same thing, with his feel and his groove. It's just a different groove. And you hear it, he does the quick fill back into the side stick. Boom, ba, boom, boom, ba, boom, bum, bum, boom, to get that up. And he's back into it. And none of it's really complicated. You don't even really think about it, but that is the genius of Ringo's playing. He finds those spaces for creativity while always being tasteful, and makes that song a more dynamic song than it would have been if he just did, the obvious sort of subdued thing the whole time.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you're bringing to it, from the ears of a drummer, certain things that many of us may not pick up on. And I've often heard sometimes it's not what Ringo plays, it's what he doesn't play when he leaves space in songs. And I think there's so many songs that sound so simple but are just what was necessary. Like a lot of people point to In My Life for that
I was just
particular reason. When you don't play, that is a statement in the song.
Yeah, In My Life is a top 10 Ringo drum performance, as is Something. And the cool thing about Something, and a lot of tunes on Revolver, generally when a drummer's playing, you're keeping time on the hi-hat or the ride cymbal, maybe the floor tom. The standard beat that everyone thinks of is the there's something that's riding there. In Something and a lot of Revolver, Ringo doesn't do any of that. He's just doing your kick and snare. Even Taxman, boom, ba, boom, ba, boom, ba. There's no, he only brings it in when it's necessary. And to have the forethought to know, like, it doesn't need this, like, let the other instruments fill the space. That is truly the brilliance of it. And people, I think that's the other thing. People, I think, get this thought in their mind, like, oh, well, anyone could play that beat. Like, okay, sure. But would you have thought of that? Like, Ringo was the first person to really think, like, this is what needs to go here. I could go on forever about it, but you're absolutely correct. And like I said, I wanted to highlight some songs that I don't think people think about, as drum heavy or drum focused songs, but they're just as crucial to the overall song. When you listen to Tell Me What You See, that entire electric piano break is so different than the rest of the song. And you have to, when you sit down and think why, a lot of it is the drums. Like, I can tell you that from a drummer's perspective, but it's not like I heard that song for the first time and thought, oh, what a brilliant drum performance by Ringo. It's listening to it for years and realizing like, oh, like this dynamic aspect of it is so unique, and it's so brilliant. And I think that's one of the most underrated Beatles songs out there anyway.
Without mentioning your third song, since you mentioned Something, that's a song that, and you can say this about a lot of great music from all artists, you can listen to a song hundreds of times and still discover something new. It's only recently that I've come to realize that that middle part in Something where they're singing, you're asking me, will my love grow? Such interesting drumming going on in the background there. And sometimes I think it was just very subtle and it wasn't mixed hot enough for people to really hear it as well. Do you think that Ringo originally, obviously you can hear a lot of his drumming on Beatles songs well, but some of it wasn't brought up enough?
We had a slight conversation a half-hour conversation before we started recording, wherein I said that I think Abbey Road is the best sounding record of all time sonically. Maybe not necessarily much on that record, although I do know what you're saying. Definitely on earlier records. I think starting around Revolver is when you really start to hear both Ringo's drums and Paul's bass a little bit more. But I think part of that is just, the advancements in recording technology. The recording technology that they had while they were recording Please Please Me was way different just 3 years later. And certainly we have Jeff Emmerich to thank for that, and a lot of them. But yeah, I think that's a part of it. But the other side of that coin is that it just goes to show that you really do need to, in order to truly understand something or to form an opinion on something, you do have to dig a little deeper than listening to something once and saying, okay, well, this is what's happening, or I like this, or I don't like this. Not that there's certainly something to be said for the immediate reaction to something, but no pun intended about the song Something. But yeah, you wouldn't listen to that song and immediately think, what an incredible drum performance, because you're going to listen to the beautiful melody and the vocals and the guitar solo, and rightfully so.
Right.
But it's only after listening to it where, yeah, you think in that bridge where that where I think he's hitting it on the hi-hat and then they overdubbed a floor tom, so it's like it's so heavy and it's so dynamic, and without realizing that you're paying attention to it, it's affecting you, kind of like what I was just talking about with Tell Me What You See. Yeah, I saw your face when I said it, and you're like, has Dylan heard Tell Me What You See? But it's when you pay attention to it, like the drums are playing a pretty big part in creating the overall dynamic shift of that song. And that's what good musicians do. And
this is why I have you on. I want to learn. Hey, we can all learn from each other here.
This is true. I mean, this show. I know very little about anything else. So if I have any opportunity to talk about something I might know a little bit about and make me sound smarter than I am, I'll take it.
Okay. I'll do my best to make you sound smarter.
Thank you. Yeah, just edit this afterwards and take out all the dumb stuff. So for the third one,
yeah, good.
I did have to go with something off of Abbey Road, which I think is Ringo's finest moment as a drummer, as well as I think Paul and George's finest moments on their instruments. I could pick almost any song off of Abbey Road, and I thought about discussing Oh Darling or I Want You, but I'm going to go with Here Comes the Sun, maybe another song that people don't really think of as it pertains to the drum part, but he is low-key putting on a masterclass during Here Comes the Sun. He's playing as tasteful as ever during the verses and the choruses, and really doing a great job at pushing that song forward. It can be really easy when a song either is naturally slow or quiet to drag, and this is a song that's based around the acoustic guitar, but Ringo refuses to let it drag. He's always propelling that song forward. Then you get to the different turnarounds in that song, and he handles them perfectly. Without wanting to bore you or anyone watching, the song is mostly in 4/4 time, which we call standard time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and every single song you've heard usually has this beat. That's normally what you hear. The turnaround at the end of the chorus switches to a 12/8 time signature, which means that there are more beats in the measure. There's 12 beats instead of 4. And there's a totally different type of note that equals 1 beat, which I won't try to describe because I don't want to bore you, but it's a completely different drum beat. And in these sorts of situations, it can be very easy to overplay or to sound awkward or to make the listener lose their place in the song. It can be easy to lose yourself actually playing it, which you can hear Ringo do a couple times in the rehearsals for this song that came out on the Abbey Road set. It's pretty fun listening to the initial run through of him and Paul and George, where Ringo's trying to figure out what the hell is happening here. But he figured out exactly what to play to keep the rhythm accessible to the ears. He does the simple hits throughout the riff, before that classic Ringo fill, measure 2/4 before going back into 4/4. Then you get the bridge of the song, which to my ears, I wrote it down, sounds like a measure of 4/4, a measure of 2/4, a measure of 3/8, and a measure of 11/8. In layman's terms, that means it's weird. And it's weird timing, which George was the master at, both with the Beatles and in his solo career. His time signatures would go way off track, and you hear it in songs like Run of the Mill and Beautiful Girl especially. But it's very easy to play the wrong thing, like I said, to make it sound awkward, but he finds all the right places to lay out, the places to keep time, and the places to fill over all of it. And years later, you'd get a guy like Neil Peart in Rush, who would generally play something extremely complicated and technically proficient over time signatures like this. And I don't want to knock that because it's not bad. And certainly Neil Peart was more talented than I'll ever be. But I think that there's such a magic to the way that Ringo navigated odd time signatures. And he did it in She Said, She Said, which I didn't realize for years switched time signatures in the bridge. Good Morning, Good Morning, which a lot of people don't know the verse in that song. There's a measure of like 10 or something. It's strange. Happiness is a Warm Gun. They're all over the place. And Here Comes the Sun, like I said, I think it's just a masterclass because it's all those turnarounds. They happen multiple times in that song. It would be so easy to make that sound awkward, but Here Comes the Sun is one of the most pleasant listening experiences for anyone ever. And I think a big part of that is because Ringo handled it as well as he did. I think it's completely incredible. It takes so much intuition that a lot of drummers lack, because a lot of drummers, they want to overcomplicate things. And that was the beauty of Ringo. He rarely, if ever, overcomplicated things.
You pointed out all the songs that I would have thought of. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds also changes time signature, and Ringo just makes it all seamless on the records, and you'd never know that it's complicated.
I did a show 8 years ago with my old band. It was a Beatles night. Every band was playing all Beatles stuff, and we were the last band added to the bill, so every other band sent us their set list so there wouldn't be any repeat songs. And there's not a bad song in the catalog, so I'm certainly not going to shame anyone for anything, but I kind of thought like, man, all these bands are taking the easy way out. They're all doing I Saw Her Standing There and Twist and Shout, and I love that stuff, but no one's gonna take any chances, you know. So we were like, screw it, we're gonna make a rock and roll version of Love You Too, and we're gonna do Don't Let Me Down, and we're gonna do Getting Better. And but we did She Said, which, like I said, most of that song, I mean, and certainly, like I said, the drums to that song have been discussed to death. I mean, his fills throughout all that song are incredible. But that's another song. Most everything is in 4. She said, but it gets to the bridge. She said 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. When I was a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, everything was right. It's the waltz, kind of like We Can Work It Out, for fussing and fighting, my friend. But you don't even realize it, because what Ringo does in She Said at that part is he literally just goes to the snare and rides on that. When I was a boy, bum, 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 bum. He's not trying to accent, you know, where the 1 is to make everyone know, like, hey, look at us, we're doing this cool thing. It's like, nope, this is how the song needs to groove. I didn't realize until I had to learn that song that it switched time signatures. Happiness is a Warm Gun, I knew was weird, but I didn't know it was as weird as it was. I mean, Mother Superior Jump the Gun switches from 6/8 to 6/4 to 6/8 to 7/4. You know, Mother Superior Jump the Gun. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4. But it never sounds awkward. And there's a lot of bands I could name, you know, prog rock bands or otherwise, that they try to do that stuff and it never sounds right to my ears, because I think they're overcomplicating it. And that's the beauty of Ringo. And so yeah, that's why I wanted to highlight Here Comes the Sun, because I don't think people think of that song as a drum song like they do She Said, or Rain, or even A Strawberry Fields Forever, or Come Together. But it's the drums are so crucial to that song and making that song flow. I mean, again, I think most people would not disagree that that's one of the most beautiful songs ever written and recorded. And most of the other most beautiful songs ever written and recorded don't have bridges that switch from 4/4 to 2/4 to 3/8 to 11/8. You know, that's just not how it goes. And I mean, thank God we had Ringo to drive through that. It's really remarkable.
Yeah, I've often said that you know, unfortunately, the Beatles' music, the songs are so good, just as songs. Half the time in my lifetime that I've listened to them, I'm singing along with them. I'm not paying attention to what each guy is bringing to the song. And, you know, that's the problem with it. The songs are so good.
Well, it was funny. Yeah. That same show we were learning the songs. We were doing Getting Better. And the first time we ran through it, everyone in the band kept messing up, because just under their breaths, you know, we get to the chorus, and it's getting better all the time, and everyone just under their breaths kept going better, 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 and they weren't focused on it. It's like, God, like, I get it, like, I'm singing it in my head too, but you gotta focus on what you're doing. You know, the melodies and the lyrics are always so strong, or they're so, you know, memorable, that sometimes you don't think about what's happening underneath them. It's when you look at what's happening underneath them that you uncover the brilliance of their music and them as musicians. You know, that, and it's not just Ringo. I mean, I've heard a lot of people, including musicians who I otherwise respect, say like, oh, well, no one in that band was really a great musician. And I like, that's such a misguided and objectively wrong thing to say. You know, maybe they weren't, you know, doing stuff like Led Zeppelin, you know, where the 3 main instrumentalists in that band were kind of, again, to use this phrase again, just like at 11 all the time. I mean, Led Zeppelin album number 1, side 1, track 1, Good Times, Bad Times.
Uh-huh.
I mean, what the drums are iconic. The guitar solo in that song is insane. John Paul Jones has 2 bass solos and they're incredible. And it's amazing. And that is the brilliance and the awesomeness of Led Zeppelin's music. But that's not the band that the Beatles were. They showcase their brilliance, which is a different type of brilliance in a different way. I mean, I can't fathom saying that Jim Keltner is a worse drummer than Keith Moon because Jim Keltner didn't blow up his drum set,
Right.
There's none of it is, supposed to fit in one little circle. There's so many aspects to greatness. And but yeah, I mean, again, not to throw out any hot takes, but the Beatles were pretty great at everything they did.
There's all different types of musicians. And that's
Yeah.
the thing. I don't put the Beatles in that category of improvisational, when it comes to doing a lot of solos on stage.
No.
But what I've often said is a great musician is a musician that plays well his instrument, but a great musician is one that not only plays well, but plays well with the people around them and complements them and brings out the best in everybody. And that's where the Beatles really, as musicians, they shined,
Oh yeah, I mean, if you haven't had anyone on this channel yet discuss John's brilliance as a guitarist, you should get someone on to do that, because obviously George was the lead guitarist, so people focus on that. But John's rhythm guitar playing was so crucial. I mean, the example that I think a lot of people point to is All My Loving, because he's doing that quick which is just hard to play.
Right.
But even the stuff that might be easy to play, he again, people, again, I think still somehow have that image in their heads of like John is the leader of that band, or like the main voice of that band, and they focus on his voice, and his voice is brilliant. But I would recommend that you get a good guitarist on here to dissect exactly how crucial John was.
And I will attempt to do so.
Yeah. But let's stick with Ringo for now, because that's the stuff I really know.
Okay.
So for his solo stuff,
All right.
So I picked out 3 songs from the back half of his solo career for 2 reasons. Firstly, because he utilized other drummers on all of his early records, and you can certainly tell when his influence in playing is the most prevalent. Songs like Back Off Boogaloo or On the Greatest, like those are Ringo drum songs. But yeah, I wanted to be sure I was going with songs where he was the sole drummer, because on a lot of the on all those albums, he had someone else playing alongside him, which I don't think was really necessary, but they turned out great.
I was going to ask you what you think about double drumming in the studio.
I mean, if it works, it's great. I mean, I'm a big fan of the Allman Brothers, so I can't speak ill of it. And I like the Grateful Dead a lot too. They did it, and I mean, George and Ringo did it quite a bit across their early records, and I would never argue with the results. That's not what I'm saying. I just, if I'm going to be talking about his solo drum performances, I don't want to run that risk, because I've always had a suspicion. So for most of Buku's a Blues, Ringo's not drumming. The main drummer on that record is DJ Fontana, Elvis's drummer. But I've always had a suspicion that Ringo has to be playing on Silent Homecoming, because it's just so Ringo, and I'll get into that in a minute, what people mean when they say play it like Ringo. But when I hear Silent Homecoming, he is credited as playing drums on the album as well. And I'm like, even if it's just that one song, like that has to be him. But I wanted to be sure that we were just talking Ringo here.
Yeah, but just to add to that, it's very frustrating, and with all the conversation lately about All Things Must Pass, when you're dealing with an album with so many great musicians and you wish you could break it down song by song, who's playing on what, and there's still going to be some confusion.
Yeah.
Like you, I've heard Ringo does play drums on the Blues Blues album, but you don't know which songs.
Yeah,
So
at least with All Things Must Pass, even though there's nothing like definitive, like we can really look at the date and say this, but there's been a lot of research done. And I trust that most of those songs where you see the personnel, I trust that enough research has been done to say, okay, this is kind of who's playing it. Like I know that Ringo's playing on My Sweet Lord and Wah Wah.
you say that. I
I
interviewed
say it, and
Alan
it's been
White.
reported, and I have no reason to not believe it. But yeah, we don't know, and we don't know. Yeah, on Silent Home or Buku's a Blues. Buku's a Blues is maddening because the musicians across that record are all amazing, and you don't know who's playing what on what song. That is so maddening to me, and I don't even know if those records still exist. I wish they would. But anyway, so I went with the back half of his career because I think of his original early records, pre sobriety records. I think only Old Wave and Bad Boy he's the only drummer on, and I'm not even sure about Old Wave off the top of my head. I know he's the only drummer on Bad Boy, but every other record there's another drummer. But the other reason is because, in my opinion, I think Ringo's real peak as a drummer was between 1966 and 1970-71. And he didn't decline after that by any means. All of his drumming throughout the 70s is great at best, and at worst is perfectly adequate. But, he was rarely in the overwhelmingly creative environment that was present in the latter half of the Beatles' career and when he was working on All Things Must Pass and Plastic Ono Band. And his mindset shifted too. He went from being able to focus on being the drummer for the Beatles, surrounded by three of the greatest songwriters of all time, to being the front man, the showman, the celebrity. His drumming is still great, but he was in charge of a lot more. So even though, again, his playing was never bad, I think that he reconnected with his drumming in certain ways after he got sober.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the first tune I'm going with is the title track to Vertical Man. So this song kind of lives in the same world as I Am the Walrus and When We Was Fab. These really deep, heavy, plodding grooves where every downbeat, which is like the kick drum, and the backbeat, which is the snare, just feels so monstrous that like every single one is so powerful. And it's one of 1,000 examples where Ringo just proves he's the best at making these simple drum beats sound like the coolest drum parts ever created, because his feel and his pocket are just unparalleled. And so he switches it up during the first few choruses. He adds some extra snare hits to accent the lyrics, come on and kick the bottom out, kind of playing along with that.
Right.
And when he does that, that's where you hear the example of what people want when they say, play it like Ringo. It's halfway in between a straight beat and a swung beat. And it's executed perfectly. It has that bounce. A straight beat is your classic da 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 ba ba ba. A swung is a da 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 da. Ringo usually lives in between that. When he executes it correctly, which he does 99 times out of 100, it's a beautiful thing. And so up through the second chorus of Vertical Man, he's doing that in spades. And then from the bridge on out, it's a myriad of so many other things I love about his playing. He throws in a bunch of his trademark fills, kind of like the Day in the Life fills. They're equally disciplined and chaotic. It feels like a controlled falling down the stairs. And he's augmenting the main beat with more, snare hits. He's filling over the lyrics where there might not be a beat normally, in that last chorus, come on and kick the bottom out. He just keeps going. And he's back in his prime here. Obviously Mark Hudson, producer of that record, his thing was helping Ringo not be afraid to harken back to the Beatle days, which, depending on who you ask, is either a positive or a negative thing. But in this instance, everything came together, no pun intended. And he's 1966, 67 Ringo again. He's just fearless and virtuosic in his own distinct way. And I think it's remarkable. And that's a song, I've always liked that song, but in recent years, it's just really stood out to me and opened itself up to me even more.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a favorite of mine. I just want to comment one thing, because I didn't get a chance to finish. I interviewed Alan White here on my channel here, and he told me that he drummed on My Sweet Lord and that Ringo played the tambourine. Now, I'll also add to that in interviewing, but no, I'm just letting you know.
Of course.
In interviewing Ken Womack and Jason Krupa for their new book, All Things Must Pass Away, Jason had said to me that he spoke to Jim Keltner, and Jim Keltner says, "I know Ringo's drums anywhere," and that's Ringo on My Sweet Lord. So what are you going to say? I don't want to tell Alan White he's wrong. He was there. You would think, trust the person who was there. And then Jim Keltner, with those ears, you think it has to be Ringo. But still, I think we're uncertain. And Ringo himself apparently doesn't remember.
And why would he? I mean, he didn't really do his memory many favors during the 70s and the 80s. But I mean, I think Jim Keltner is much more of an expert on the subject than I am. My Sweet Lord has always sounded to me like that's Ringo back there, but we don't know. And I mean, it's one of the more maddening aspects of being not even just a Beatles fan, but kind of a fan of classic music. Like, you hear that thing, Jimmy Page was one of the session guitarists on what's the Kinks tune? You Really Got Me. But then some people say, no, he wasn't on that session, or he was and they mixed it out, or he is and it's in there. And it's just like, what the hell, guy?
What if
I guess they didn't. Exactly. It's like, I guess we weren't thinking back then, hey, this is going to revolutionize rock and roll. Maybe we should write this down. Maybe we should write down that one of the most influential rock bands of all time has a member of a soon to be other influential rock band playing, but anyway, my second choice, speaking of fearless and virtuosic, going with Eye to Eye, the opening track from Ringo Rama.
You're saying exactly what I would say.
So I said earlier, I'd show someone boys from the Hollywood Bowl if they weren't sure why Ringo the Beatles so praised. If anyone has any doubts that Ringo couldn't still play with the best of them post Beatles, you don't really need to look any further than Eye to Eye. He is as unhinged as you can be on this song while still keeping it all together. Right from the opening drum fill of that song, he's a total madman. He is wailing away during the intro, and then when everything drops for the first verse, he kind of just keeps wailing away. He goes to the closed hi-hat for a minute to restore some sense of normalcy, but by the middle of that verse, which is only 2 or 4 lines long, he's already augmenting the beat and filling, and he's opening the hi-hat, and he's giving it that washy feel that you get in a lot of those early Beatles tunes, like I Want to Hold Your Hand, where he's just going on that open hi-hat.
Right.
He just never lets up. And I implore anybody watching or listening to this, pause this video, go put on Eye to Eye, and fast forward to 2 minutes and 13 seconds for one of the coolest, most killer drum fills of all time by Ringo or any drummer. He incorporates 3 different variations of classic Ringo fills, and he strings them all together with this confidence and this power that's palpable. And it ends with those quick sort of like Oh Darling style triplets that, and for your reference, as someone who knows, this is the part of the song, after the bridge and the guitar solo, remember when I said it don't come easy? It seems so long ago, so long, you know, kind of
Yeah.
gets real psychedelic. It's that drum fill. It is madness.
Yep.
It's absolutely insane. And, you know, I wanted to pick a song from his solo career that demonstrates his restraint and how good that, like, I was going to talk about King of Broken Hearts, you know, for a minute for the same way. But honestly, there's so many of those types of songs throughout his solo career. I really wanted to highlight this performance because everyone knows how good Ringo is at being tasteful and keeping it simple. And yeah, I could name 30 or 40 different solo songs right now, like King of Broken Hearts or, you know, Golden Blunders from Time Takes Time. You know, it's all tasteful and it's all great. But, you know, I think people deserve to know, because also I don't know the last time that anyone watching this has listened to Ringo Rama. So go listen to Eye to Eye. And yeah, I think it deserves to be highlighted. As does my third pick, which I know you'll like this one because I feel like either we've talked about it or I've heard you talk about it.
Let me guess. Instant Amnesia?
No, although was thinking about that as well. I wanted to go to 3 different records.
Okay.
So I'm going with Time from Why Not. So this song in general is really unlike any other song in his catalog. It's a total musical tour de force. The whole band on this song, I didn't write it down, but I know Benmont Tench, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers keyboardist. I know he's playing piano, which is kind of the driving force of that song in some ways. The piano and organ work on that song is amazing. I think Dave Stewart is on guitar. I don't know if that was a Ringo Dave Stewart co-write, but I think he's playing guitar on it.
I think it was. I think it was written by the two of them.
And I think the violinist on that song is Anne Marie Calhoun. I'm losing the bassist in the moment, but like everyone on that song is just remarkable. I mean, the last 2 minutes of that song is basically a jam, and everyone's sort of soloing at the same time. But the song never gets lost. But there's just no other song in his catalog that's anything like that. It's basically verse, chorus, bridge, jam.
Yep.
And, you know, Ringo has always sort of operated under that Otis, the Otis modus operandi of, you know, stick to the song, play to the song. So you don't get a lot of things like this. But it's remarkable. And you know what you're supposed to be listening to at all times. You don't get lost in it. I hate to keep overusing this word. I can't think of a better one right now, but it's virtuosic across the board, including Ringo, who again, from the opening drum fill, is just on another planet. Like he never does at any point in time what you might expect him to do. Like he initially comes in with that drum fill, and it's kind of a subdued verse, but he immediately goes to the ride cymbal, but then he switches to the hi-hat halfway through. None of it really makes sense, but it's never wrong. He never plays the wrong thing. And starting in that first chorus, he starts throwing in these quick syncopated cymbal jabs where he's choking them at the same time. Again, I can't think off the top of my head of too many other songs where he's doing stuff like that. And he just continues it throughout the outro. And again, with some more classic Ringo fills, the whole thing is stunning. And it's another kind of perfect song to show anyone who's not familiar with the solo music and needs convincing that, you know, his drumming is still top notch. Because again, that song in particular, it's just everything that could and has ever made Ringo great is on display in that song. It's absolutely remarkable. Also, my cats potentially might be about to chase each other. So if you or anyone hears any galloping or meowing or hissing in the background, that's what it is. It just makes for good YouTube, folks. But yeah, Time. Why not? That's the third choice.
Excellent choices. I always like, in particular, not necessarily more than everything else, when Ringo does a song that's unlike anything he's done before. And
Oh
Time is
yeah.
definitely one of them. And you described it so well with the last couple of minutes just jamming. And when does that ever happen? You know, when you
Yeah.
have a song like that, or Instant Amnesia, which to me, you know, I like to bring up that one and Time, but Instant Amnesia is very much like manic depression. It has that feel. And
Yep.
something like Free Drinks from Choose Love, which is a very
Hmm.
80s song, and they really stand out. You know, there's I think a lot of it does come from the different songwriters that he writes with,
Hmm.
that bring out a whole different style. You know, and that's I wonder, because if you listen, especially in the post Mark Hudson period, and he's written with so many different great people like a Dave Stewart or Van Dyke Parks or Richard Marx or
Hmm.
Gary Burr or Joe Walsh. Of course, he wrote with him on Old Wave. They all bring out a different style, and because
Hmm.
they're co-writing the songs with him. So maybe his drumming might be a little bit different for those songs. Do you ever stop to think maybe the songwriters that he writes with, that his drumming changes a little bit?
Oh yeah. I mean, to me, I think I think it's certainly dependent on that, as well as whoever the band might be in any given section or any session. Yeah, because you could look at how much he's written and played with Steve Lukather over the last however
Mm,
many records, and Lukather's thing, whether it's Toto, uh, Michael Jackson, like he's a very clean player. Everything is always sort of, and it's even when it's like loud or distorted, it's always very clean. And you can hear in a lot of those songs, those are some of the tunes where Ringo will really sort of keep it nice and simple and straight, because like we're kind of trying to create this almost like a uniform thing, something like Time or Instant Amnesia or Ida. And I was gonna potentially talk about Instant Amnesia too, but I really wanted to highlight Eye to Eye, and I wanted to do different records.
mm.
But Time and Instant Amnesia, like those are not uniform songs. He's doing something different in every verse or every chorus or just these random different sections. And this isn't a positive or a negative. It's just what it is. Like not every song can be like that. And I feel like you especially see that with someone like a Steve Lukather, where his writing style and his playing style is generally in sort of a more composed technical way. And so I think Ringo, for some of those songs, he's more likely to, let's find the groove, let's stay there, and let's kind of push the ship forward that way. But yeah, I think that absolutely plays a part in it.
Mm.
I mean, there's so much great, and there's a lot of great drumming from the early parts of his career too. Again, excuse me, Back Off Boogaloo and I'm the Greatest
Mm.
are the two that I highlight. I mean, you can go, I think his assuming that he's the main drummer, or at least partly drumming on Dose of Rock and Roll, there's really great drumming there. um but at no point has this guy ever lost his mojo. And it's very apparent, I think, when you listen to the post sobriety records. And really, not a knock at all, it is playing on Time Takes Time, it's as good as anything. But I do think working with Mark Hudson, really being unafraid to go back to that Beatles thing, I think that is really the start of him sort of reconnecting with, like, you know what, I was the greatest drummer in the world, like I don't need to be afraid to sort of go out of left field. And I think that's really important. And even perfect example what you're just talking about, is it 2 songs on Time Takes Time that he did with Jeff Lynne? Don't Go Where the Road Don't Go and After All These
And
Years.
right, those two.
Just those 2.
Yeah.
So Jeff Lynne's thing, especially in that period of time, Jeff Lynne's production is very static. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because to me, the trio of Cloud Nine, Wilburys Volume 1, and Full Moon Fever by Tom Petty. I mean, find a better, run of 3 records by a producer in the 80s. It's great, but he's very much like, we're going to have this very consistent sort of feel, of a very uniform feel, the same drum parts in every verse, the same drum parts in every chorus, the same drum fills in these different parts of the song. And you hear that in songs like Don't Go Where the Road Don't Go, and After All These Years. And it's great because they're good songs and Ringo's playing them really well. And it's not that he doesn't sound like himself, but that's the songwriter he's working with, and that's the producer he's working with. So it's gonna sort of fall into that aspect of things. And I think for the Mark Hudson years in general, I think Hudson was just so willing all the time to be like, hell yeah, let's make it Beatle-y. Like, why? You're a Beatle. Why would we not want to make Beatle-y sounding music? Why would I not want you to play like a Beatle? So I think when he was working with that group of songwriters, that was the mindset. And across those three, it could be 3 records or it could be 5 records, whether or not you want to count the Christmas record and how you look at Liverpool 8. But the 3 distinct original Mark Hudson records, Vertical Man, Ringo Rama, and Choose Love, you really hear that very free sort of Beatle-y playing. Actually, even on the Christmas record, the Little Drummer Boy, I mean, he's doing really classic Ringo fills over that. Yeah, I play my drum for you, and boom, 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 boom. But it's almost comical because it's like, yep, that's a Ringo fill, and it's the Little Drummer Boy. So I think you're absolutely right. But as it pertains to time, I don't know what the hell happened during that session. I don't know who is in charge. I don't know what the direction was, but there is absolutely no song in his catalog like that song. And again, not just him, every single person on that recording is like, geez, guys, like, you don't have to show off and make the rest of us feel so bad. Like, it's remarkable.
Yeah, definitely. Everybody watching the show, if you never heard that song, go on YouTube. Ringo Starr, Time.
All 3 of those songs.
Yeah.
Vertical Man, Eye to Eye, and Time. Like, that's Ringo. If you don't know what he was capable of in a solo career, it's there.
It's funny. Before we do our third topic, one of my sons is a musician who plays practically every instrument under the sun. But his main instrument, just like you, is drums. And he listens to all the solo music. And I just asked him, knowing that we were going to do our show, I said, what Ringo songs from his solo career do you really love his drumming that really stand out? And what did he say? Eye to Eye, and Vertical Man, and Instant Amnesia. So
awesome.
Yeah, I got to get the 2 of you together.
I was gonna say, I think that would be a lethal combination, but probably a necessary one.
Yeah. And Back Off Boogaloo. I love the sound of his drums on Back Off Boogaloo. I kind of
relentless.
One thing that I do miss is, in the Beatle years, whenever the drum heads were loosened and you had that thicker, fatter sound. And I love it on Back Off Boogaloo in particular. And you don't hear it that much throughout Ringo's solo career, but
no, not really to that level. It was funny, I knew I was gonna pick songs from the back half of his catalog anyway, and then when I went to go think of the early career anyway, it was like, again, it's not that any of it's not great or perfect, but just in terms of like a standout drumming performance. And like I said, I think that a lot of that is not to denigrate any of the music, and especially not the first Ringo record. I think everyone loves that first Ringo record, but if we're calling a spade, he was not in the same creative environment that he was in when he was making the White Album and Abbey Road and Plastic Ono Band, All Things Must Pass, and Sgt. Pepper to a degree. Like his playing on those records, like the reason I say that's his prime is because he was able to buckle down and say, okay, I'm the drummer in the world's greatest band. So I'm gonna do everything that I can, and he absolutely crushes it. It's truly not that his playing ever declined. He was just in a totally different headspace and playing different music. There's not a single drum track on the Ringo album that's bad, but also other than I'm the Greatest, which has some kind of cool stuff in it, I don't listen to any of those songs and think like, wow, like what an amazing, drum performance from Ringo. Like that wasn't his focus. So I'm glad that he has reconnected with it over the last 25, 30 years, because it never went away. It was more just, in some ways, it was kind of just dormant, and it just needed to be brought out again. And it's awesome that he can still do it.
There's so many more questions I want to ask you, but we got to move along here.
I know.
And so let's
we
talk
can
about
do this.
The All-Starr Bands, which, as I said,
Yes.
he started in 1989. So many wonderful ones. I'm very fortunate that I can say that I've been to every tour of his, to on average like 2 shows per tour. So I may have actually seen Ringo more than Paul at this point.
Yeah.
But for you, what stands out as your 3 favorite bands of his, and why?
Well, I'm not as fortunate as you, especially because I was born in 1991. So,
It's no
the
excuse.
first, yeah, this is true. I'll talk to my parents and reach some sort of agreement here. But I have got to see him 4 times. I saw every All-Star Band between the 8th and 11th lineups. So I saw 03, 06, 08, and 2010. So one of them, I'm going to give a shout out to my favorite iteration of the band that I got to see, which was the 10th lineup in 2008. So there's Edgar Winter, who I love. He's on board. Hamish Stewart's there to pick up the pieces. Gary Wright is there. Colin Hay, who's always excellent. And really, the biggest surprise for me was Billy Squier, who, if I'm being honest, I'm not a fan of Billy Squier. His music does not really do a whole hell of a lot for me, but he began winning me over in 2006, his first tour with the band. He did a wonderful solo rendition of Ramblin' on My Mind, the old Robert Johnson blues tune. Kind of highlighted, I mean, you saw the tour, you should remember.
Well, but the solo numbers varied.
Yeah, that's true. So at that show that I saw, he did Ramblin' on My Mind. It kind of like showcased how great of a guitarist he was. But at this show in 08, he led the band through 2 songs that normally I don't have any interest in, Lonely as the Night or The Stroke. That's not really something that I jive with, but he crushed them. And it was the single most successful moment I've seen of someone whose music I don't care for making me a believer, even if just for one night, because there have been other artists with the All-Star Band that I wasn't a fan of, and I saw them, I'm like, yep, no, sorry, not saying you're untalented or this is bad, but me personally, like the 06 tour was a great band, but I didn't pick it because every time Richard Marx played a song, I was like, could anyone else be singing a song right now? I don't, it's just not my, not a knock against him. That's just my personal standpoint.
Okay. But
anyway, that whole band was great. And of course, Ringo's always great. And that's the tour that he pulled out, Oh My My. So that was a real treat. And to top it all off, at the show that I saw, Dr. John was in town. So he hopped up with a little help from my friends at the end. And that was really special. And that's the only time. It's the only time I ever saw Dr. John. It was one song singing background vocals with Ringo. I'd say my second favorite lineup is the 4th All-Star Band, which is a shame because there's no official release from that tour. But thankfully,
the Peter Frampton one? The Peter Frampton one?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Thankfully, there's videos online. Because if you're a real, to use the term, I guess at its core, a rock and roll fan, what a great lineup. So you got Gary Brooker. So you get Whiter Shade of Pale and Devil Came from Kansas every night. You got Peter Frampton, who's always amazing. Yes, that too. I forgot he did Conquistador.
Yeah.
Frampton, I'll have to tell you the story about when I saw Frampton. It's a really great story.
Uh-huh.
You have Jack Bruce, the voice of Cream, with Frampton there to play lead guitar on White Room and Sunshine of Your Love and I Feel Free. And Simon Kirk is such a solid second drummer, and you get the Free and the Bad Company songs. I mean, again, from a pure, I like every genre of music, but I'm a rock and roll kid at heart. And so that lineup to me is like, geez, like everyone here is such a, no one's really messing around in this lineup. I hope one day they'll put out a DVD or a record from that tour because it's so monstrous. But for me, far and away, best All-Star Band lineup is still the first lineup for me. Almost every other lineup has a member who I'm either indifferent to or maybe not particularly a fan of, but the first lineup across the board is stacked. I mean, the band are a top 10 or 15 group for me. So getting Rick Danko and Levon Helm as a part of that group is ridiculous. Billy Preston, I mean, what's there to say about Billy on a Beatles related show that hasn't been said? And to have Dr. John as the other keyboardist across from him, equally a giant. Joe Walsh, who's always a good time, always great. You get the Eagles and the James Gang stuff and the solo stuff. And then you get Nils Lofgren and Clarence from the E Street Band and Jim Keltner as the main drummer. This is the most consistent group of true legends and like titans that was ever put together for an all-star band. And I don't mean that to say that anyone hasn't been deserving of their spot in the band. No disrespect, even to the members that, again, like, I'm not a fan of Richard Marx, but he wrote and recorded some really popular hit songs that resonate. Of course he deserved to be in the band. But from a subjective standpoint, I like all of these musicians on such a high level. It's such a treat to see and hear them. And I would say objectively, like inarguable, this is the largest amount of collective influence and accomplishment that was ever put together on stage at one time for an all-star band. Because you consider all those groups. I mean, the band laid the groundwork for everything that we know today as roots rock. The band are one of the few contemporary bands that influenced the Beatles. They put out music from Big Pink, and we get the White Album later that year, a much more stripped down sound. That George is being influenced by them.
Yeah.
So you get those two. I mean, you have two members of the E Street Band, again, one of the most influential rock and roll bands for one of the most influential songwriters of all time. And then, I mean, Dr. John, Billy Preston, and let's not forget there's a goddamn Beatle on stage here. I mean, I get just the collective influence and the collective accomplishment. That first all-star band, to me, it's not even a contest. It's not. I guess I shouldn't say it. There's other lineups that come close, and I don't think that any of the lineups have been bad. They've all been good. Like there's always at least one person where you're like, holy crap, like that person's. I just think that first one, that's the absolute best for me. And shame on my parents for having me 2 years after the fact, because
you still could have gone to the one in 92. You would have been one, but
this is true.
There's no excuse for that.
Lineup, I mean, that second lineup is Todd Rundgren.
That's this tour here.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm trying to remember.
Burton Cummings.
Yeah, which my dad saw. My dad's very first concert was Burton Cummings opening for America. And he said that Burton Cummings solo blew America out of the water, which I think is pretty interesting. There are other, like the fourth lineup comes close for me. Some of those other late 90s and early 2000s lineups. Certainly I have a soft spot for the 03 tour, the very first tour I saw. That was Sheila E., Richard Page. I'm losing it off the top of my head, but I have such a soft spot for that band.
It's so tough
But
for me to remember if you just say the year. It's so
yeah,
many tours now. But
oh, I know that '03 was definitely Richard Page, Sheila E.
was that wait, was that the tour with Eric Carmen?
No, I think that was the tour before. I definitely never saw Eric
Okay.
Carmen.
Okay.
I'll go back and look at it later, but
All right.
it's all good, and I have a soft spot for that. But to me, it's not even a competition for me, and I'm not coming at that from a perspective of like, emotional attachment of shows I got to see, because obviously I didn't get to see a show that happened when I wasn't born, but just from, again, looking at everyone in the band thinking, what did this person accomplish? And then also, how much do I subjectively like this person? There's not a single member of that first band that there's even a question about. It's remarkable. And not to say that, it's all been downhill from there, because that's not the case. It's just sort of like, well, you pretty much nailed it that first go round, Ringo.
Well, I think he wanted to make sure. He even said he padded the lineup because of his
Yeah.
insecurity, get as many people as he could on there. And there's no doubt about it. That first lineup was tremendous. But for me, apart from everything that you just said, that all these artists have been so influential, what made so many of his bands special, especially this first tour, was that almost everybody had been on Ringo's albums.
Yeah. I guess I never
Billy
thought of that.
Preston, and you had the band playing on Sunshine Life for Me on the
Yep.
Ringo album.
Which,
You didn't have
yeah.
the Springsteen people. You didn't have them on
No,
Ringo's albums, but
but
everybody else was pretty much part of Ringo's family at that
I
point.
mean, I think Dr. John is the only keyboardist on Bad Boy, because
Yeah, I think
which
you're right.
like, regardless of what anyone thinks about the Bad Boy record, and certainly that's, that seems to be kind of a love it or hate it album for a lot of people, regardless of what you think, and I understand the arguments for both. The band on that album, that's the first record where Ringo's the only drummer. Um, who's Elton's bassist? D. Murray.
D. Murray. Yep.
He's the bassist. Dr. John is the keyboardist, and then it's a guy that wrote MacArthur Park. He's one of the
Jimmy Webb.
guitarists.
I don't no,
Yep.
I don't think it's the same Jimmy Webb. I think
Are
it's a different
you
one.
positive?
Yeah.
We'll have to look back at it. Anyway,
Okay.
but definitely Dr. John's on that record. So yeah, I think probably the E Street guy, and then obviously Joe Walsh, who produced Old Wave. But yeah, I mean, unreal. And this is the only aside, because I think we've done a good job with the time here, and we can wrap this up. So the only aside that I'm going to make, I love Sunshine Life for Me. I love that song so much. But can we agree it's kind of a missed opportunity, because the background vocals are so cool in that song, but you had on that song Rick Danko, Levon Helm, and Richard Manuel, three of the greatest voices of all time. They didn't have any of them sing the background vocals. It's George and I think Vinny Ponciet, which, again, I'm not going to complain about George Harrison, but you have the band and you're not going to put their voices. Like, imagine if they did the background vocals on Sunshine Life for Me.
Excellent
missed
point.
opportunity.
Yeah. But I love the fact you
Also,
can really pick out George on there. So
oh yeah. Well, same thing, his backing vocals on Photograph are, it's like, well, there's George. Just like you can tell that that's John singing on I'm the Greatest with him. It's the same thing. It's like, it's so magical when that happens. But yeah, I've always been really mad about that. And then the next year, 74, the only time that the band and Bob Dylan, for all the history that Bob Dylan and the band have together, that they made a record in 74 called Planet Waves,
right.
which I don't know if you're familiar with. Like, the Forever Young is obviously the one song that everyone would know. It's the only time that they ever got in the studio together, like a real studio, because they did the basement tapes, but that was all recorded in a basement, that they were self-recording. They're in a real studio for the only time ever with a producer, and Bob is the only singer on the record. And it's just like, you
Crazy.
have three other of the, even if you want to argue, because Richard Manuel's voice, unfortunately, with his drug and alcohol problems, even by the third or fourth band record, it wasn't the same. But at the very least, you've got Rick and Levon. Like, what are we doing here, Bob? I mean, so Bob and Ringo get a finger wag from me for wasting those opportunities. But the results are still good. So it's a finger wag with an asterisk.
Okay. I'm sure that Ringo and Bob are watching this right now as we speak.
I'm sure that they are, and I'm sure that they really value what I have to say. But we did it. We kept this under a good time.
Well, we say this because in our other interview, it went on for almost 2.5 hours, which is very easy to do when you've got Dylan here, when you got someone that really knows Beatles and can talk solo too. So, but I will say just one thing before we wrap up. My personal favorite of all the tours.
Yes.
I forget the year, but it's the one with Roger Hodgson in it because he's such an amazing singer. Just to hear the Logical song was worth it for me.
Of course.
And, you know, you had Greg Lake in there and Howard Jones and Sheila E. and probably someone else I'm forgetting at the moment. But that was an amazing, the thing about some of these tours is on paper, you're saying, are you kidding? All these people together, it doesn't make sense. And then when you go and see the show, it does. You know, to mix Sheila E. with Greg Lake. You know, it's like
or even like, the tour that I saw with Colin Hay and Edgar Winter. But yeah, there's Edgar Winter playing the sax on Who Can It Be Now? And you're like, well, that makes sense. Of course. Man, what I wouldn't give to hear Ringo and the All-Starr Band do 21st Century Schizoid Man, from In the Court of the Crimson King. But I don't believe they did that. But still, I mean, Greg Lake, I mean, and it's only been, he only passed away in the last couple of years. I mean, that's another tremendous loss. I mean, what a player. I mean, and that's the other thing, the thing that kind of bummed me out when I was looking at this first All-Starr Band. I'm like, well, Rick and Levon are gone. Billy's gone. Dr. John is gone. Clarence is gone. It's like Ringo, Nils, and Keltner are the only ones remaining. It's like, oh, man,
Joe Walsh.
Joe Walsh.
Okay.
Well, you could argue Joe Walsh is gone.
No,
but he's
not. He's really clean now. He's done a great job, just like Ringo.
I love Joe. I mean that with love. But yeah, that, and it makes you truly grateful for this thing that Ringo has done since 1989, because we have lost a lot of great people who have been from the All-Starr Band, and and that's life, unfortunately, and really unfortunately over the next 10 years we're gonna continue to see it. I mean, the last 5 years, we've lost Bowie and Petty and Prince and so many other ones, and we're going to continue to see it. Paul and Ringo won't be here forever. Neil Young's not going to be here forever. But the music is, and the fact that we have a recording of this first All-Starr Band with so many of these giants who are unfortunately no longer with us, but they got together and they did that tour, and it was amazing. And so really, really grateful to Ringo. None of it should ever be taken for granted.
Yeah, well, you could say that. You could say that about all the All-Star Bands, really. And there's a lot of great people that we lost that were in the other lineups. So if you were fortunate enough to go to these shows, you would have seen some of the greatest musicians we've had in rock and pop. So yeah. So let's talk about you and what you've got going right now. Shortly before this recording here, you had told me about, and this is funny because every now and then we message each other, and I'd like to find out about some new artists that Dylan's into, relatively new. And I'll tell him about an artist that I heard. And one of them that I mentioned to you was Houndmouth. Because one of the radio stations that I listen to on a regular basis, they were playing Sedona. And what a great song that is. And so you recommended to me one of their albums, and now you just perform with one of the ex-members.
Yeah, I just did. The reason I was so late in getting back to you on things to plug is because I was getting back from the road, I did a few dates with Katie Tupin, who was in the band for those first two records. Sedona's on their second record, and I think the one I recommend to you is their first one. And I mean, she is just a powerhouse vocalist. And you can hear it even in the song, like a song like Sedona. She's mostly doing harmonies on that song, but you can tell whenever she comes in that it takes the song to a new level. And then the songs that she sings lead on are absolutely phenomenal. And I was telling her, it's funny because her and I are only 2 years apart, but I found out about them when they came out. And, you know, I was 21, I think, when their first record came out. And when you're 21, you kind of just assume that everyone's older than you. And, you know, everyone is a seasoned veteran. So like playing with her and like playing some of these songs where it's like, oh my God, like I'm playing these songs that I was listening to and loving 10 years ago. And it's like, well, we're here together and yeah, we're only 2 years apart. Like it's kind of funny seeing how that all works out. But the very first thing we did together, so I had one rehearsal with her, and it was kind of like a strip. We weren't in like a nice big sound space. We're in an Airbnb living room, so we couldn't like really play. And the first thing that we did was this live session, like literally live. It was being broadcast as it was happening and now lives online forever. So no pressure, you know, first time playing these songs. Really incredible. I don't know what to call them. They're like a video audio thing called Audio Tree out of Chicago, and they've had a bunch of incredible musicians come. They've been doing it for at least, I want to say 6 or 7 years. And I did one with Ron Gallo, who I used to play with a while ago. And so the Audio Tree session that I did with her is online. It came out really, really great. And I totally forgot that we had talked about Houndmouth. So yeah, now I can flex that muscle on you. But she's just a great person, great musician. I had a lot of fun with her. And then, yeah, I also sent you, there's a great singer-songwriter named Tim Easton, kind of, I guess, an underground. He's not mainstream popular, but he's been around for the last 20 years and kind of one of those guys that if you know songwriters, like I feel like you have your level of like Bob Dylan, Neil Young, Bruce Springsteen, and then maybe the next level down are still guys that you know, like John Hyatt, people like those. But then there's another level. I don't know if you know who Peter Case is. He was in a band called the Plimsouls in the 80s.
Oh, I've heard of the Plimsouls, yeah.
And he's had a remarkable career as a singer-songwriter. He's kind of like just not leveled down in terms of talent, just in terms of commercial success, which is a shame because I think they're all on the same level. But Tim Easton is sort of in that level where like he's a songwriter and people know him. And I was lucky enough to play drums on 3 songs. He just put a new album out this last Friday, August 27th, called You Don't Really Know Me. And I played drums on 3 songs and sang background vocals on 2 songs. So please click the link that Ken has provided to you. And still going full time with the Minks, who I mentioned last time, MINKS. We just recorded an album earlier this year that we're in the process of mixing and hopefully be released early next year. So this is what I'm doing and trying to navigate it all with everything continuing to go on in the country and the pandemic. And you know,
it's been probably very tough as far as trying to set up dates.
Yeah, it's a lot of it has been tough on a lot of different levels. You know, I'm not here to make any grand statements or anything, but I will say if anyone watching this wants, you know, the music industry to continue to be a thing, a large part of that is live music. And so unless you have a major health reason, if you're not yet vaccinated, it would certainly help me and thousands of people across the country who are working just as hard as anyone else at our craft. You know, it would help to continue to get this thing under control. And so again, not trying to make any grand political statements here. It shouldn't even be a political statement, but that's another conversation for another time.
That's right.
Please, everyone, if you want to ever see me and meet me, it's probably going to be at a concert, and make it happen. I would love you so dearly if you made that happen. So,
And not just for you, but for so many musicians, performing
Mhm.
is their livelihood. For
Oh
most of
yeah.
them, they don't make a living from the sales of their music. Unfortunately, they have to go out there and perform,
Mhm.
and that's really their bread and butter.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's been tough, but it has been great to be playing again over the last however many months, and regardless of some of the challenges and the restrictions that have been put in place, it's been a nice reminder that this is in fact the only thing I'm good at, and I like doing it. So it's been great to do that again. I hope there won't be too many issues coming up. But I'm sure that the next time you have me on to ramble about God knows what, I'll have hopefully more releases and more tour dates. I can tell you that the Minx will be touring in October. Dates haven't been released yet, but if you want to come see me and you want to come see a really fun rock and roll band, we're definitely going to be kind of on the East Coast, Northeast, and Virginia and the Carolinas, doing some dates opening for Driving and Crying too. Don't know if you're familiar with them.
I've heard of them. I've
Um,
definitely heard of them.
really great band. We're lucky. We're going to do some shows with them, I think, in North and South Carolina. So that's all I have to plug at the moment.
Okay. Well, you are welcome back anytime you want. Anytime you want to ramble. We're so good at rambling.
Too
Anything in
good, some would say.
particular on the Beatles in particular that you have some burning desire to discuss, and that could be anything, you know. All
Yeah.
of a sudden you might want to bring up, I don't know, Good Night Vienna, the album, for some reason. I don't know. Whatever it is. Now come on.
I have a lot of thoughts on Call Me, but we'll get there one day.
Where
Um,
you're tempting everyone right now, teasing
I
everyone.
know. Well, yeah, people when they think of the larger scale of Ringo's oeuvre, they think of Call Me from Good Night. I really like that song.
It's
But
good.
it's been a pleasure, Ken. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you for watching. There will be links in my description box for everything that we discussed here. If you want to check out that video of Dylan with Katie Tupin, and also links for the Tim Easton music as well.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't done so, please subscribe. And we will see you next time. Take care.